occasion right now. We are broadcasting live at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, March 30th, I think, March 31st, 2020, a week before Pesach. And normally, this is a Tuesday. Normally on Tuesdays at noon, I give my weekly Torah class here in the chapel at Cedars-Sinai, and we broadcast live throughout the hospital, which we are doing right now. But we don't have anyone in the room here in the chapel because of the social distancing that we are practicing. And, it's very unique times here in the hospital as well. But since the camera is always scheduled to run every Tuesday at noon, I thought this would be a good opportunity to share some words, especially because this Shabbat, this coming week, is the Shabbos before Pesach. And that is known as Shabbos Hagadol. It's traditionally a time when the rabbi gives an annual lecture, an important presentation related both to Passover, but important ideas that people should be thinking about right now. That's this Shabbos. And unfortunately, my synagogue, Knesset Israel of Beverlywood on Robertson Boulevard, is closed, as are all synagogues right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I won't be able to deliver my Shabbos Hagadol Drasha this Shabbat, but I had prepared it. This year I was prepared well in advance, and I knew what I wanted to talk about. And also I want to be in touch with the members of my synagogue, and this way people from around the world can listen in as well. And so I'm talking to a lot of people right now. I'm talking to Knesset Israel. In my mind, it's partially, Shabbat afternoon in preparation for Pesach, and I'm giving my Shabbos Hagadol Drasha. But in reality, I'm standing here in a major medical center in the midst of this COVID crisis, where we are reaching out to patients, their families, and our incredible staff. And they're listening in live, watching on the TVs, Channel 50, throughout the hospital. I'm speaking to patients, and I'm really speaking especially to our staff right now. And so I'm trying to keep everyone in mind. And so my message today is going to be related to Passover. I'm going to be using a specific law in the laws of Pesach to present an idea that I think is important to think about this year during the crisis, but really all year for all people. And it's something that I've already begun to try to incorporate into my daily practice. And the discussion really begins with the issue of the extent of care providers, but all people's responsibilities to care for others. Meaning my concern is, how far are we expected to go for others? Right now, in the midst of this pandemic, people are going quite out of their way for other people, and it's really beautiful. It's inspiring and wonderful to see. It's also very stressful and overwhelming for a lot of people. How much should we expect of others to bend over backwards and extend themselves on behalf of another person? And does it matter if that other person is their patient, their friend, their loved one, or a stranger on the street? And when we think about this in terms of healthcare providers, you know that there's a Hippocratic Oath, and in which a modern rendition of the Hippocratic Oath actually requires healthcare providers to treat without expectation all who seek my ministrations, anyone who's in need. And the AMA actually put out a social contract with humanity a number of years ago, which said that all physicians should apply our knowledge and skills whenever needed, though doing so may put us at risk. And in the Jewish community as well, I came across a fascinating response of the Steipler Gaon. Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein, in his compendium on medical halacha, discusses this issue, and he quotes the Steipler Gaon, Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky of Bnei Brak, who was asked the following interesting question. There was a man who had some medical training and rabbinic training, and he wanted to know, I have two offers. I can become a doctor. If I become a doctor, I can live wherever I want in the midst of the Jewish community, and my family will be comfortable and happy, and I'll have a profession and a living. Or I can be a rabbi. I have an offer to go to a far-off village where I can serve as the rabbi. Now, if I'm the rabbi, I'll be the only observant Jew in that community. It'll be difficult for my children. But of course, I'll try to teach Torah and help make a difference. Which rabbi should I do? Not which rabbi. I'm saying, rabbi, which should I do? Become a doctor or a rabbi? And the Steipler Gaon responded as follows. He says, La'anios daiti, in my opinion, Rabbonos adifa yoter v'yoter mikama sibot. It's much more important, I believe you should become a rabbi. Why? So his reason is fascinating. He says, because to become a doctor, to save lives, it's very difficult to fulfill the responsibilities and expectations that Judaism requires of you as a doctor. What's Judaism require? If you are able to save someone, you must do everything you possibly can. And you can't even think about the loss of money or time that it might take you. You must do everything you can for every person that needs you. So that's quite an expectation. And my question is really, is that indeed what Judaism requires? Are we required to go that far, that you must do everything, always, to care for someone in need? In fact, Judaism does regard healthcare, pikuach nefesh, saving lives, atzalat nafashot, as an incredible mitzvah. The Shulchan Aruch records it as a mitzvah. In fact, it even writes that someone who can save someone, but doesn't, it's ke'ilu shofech damim. It's a type of shedding blood if you don't save someone's life. Rav Zilberstein, in that same sefer I was quoting, Shiurei Torah LaRofim, he writes something really interesting. He was asked, if it's such a mitzvah, why is there no bracha? Why don't we make a blessing? Every time we do a mitzvah, we make a bracha before we do the mitzvah. But a doctor, a nurse comes into work, is doing mitzvot all day long, saving lives, and yet there's no bracha on saving life, on health, providing health care? Why not? So he explains, he gives a fascinating reason. He bases it on the pasuk in the Torah, in Shmos, which says, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yisa'u. You should speak to the Jewish people and then travel. And the rabbi said, Shemoshe amar ba'osa Shabbat tefillah, that Moses at that moment began to pray. He was praying when the people were in need. Amar lo Hashem yishbarach. So God said to Moshe, Banai omdim b'tzara. My children are sitting in pain. They're suffering. Omdim b'tzara v'ein ata ha'es la'arbos b'tefillah. Now is not the time to pray. So, based on that midrash, Rav Zilberstein suggests, he says, L'chein lo tiknu chazal bracha l'rofeh. This is why the rabbis did not institute a blessing for providing health care for a doctor or a nurse. Mi'achar ve'achola omed v'shorui b'tzar. Shorui b'tzar. The patient is sitting in pain. The person's in need. Ve'ein l'rofa liza'akev b'tefillah. So you shouldn't waste time that it would take to pray. How long does it take to make a blessing, to make a bracha? 2 seconds? 3 seconds? Maybe some people 5 seconds? But it doesn't take a long time. For me, 10 seconds? No. It doesn't take a long time to make a bracha. But still, Rav Zilberstein says that the reason why we don't make a bracha for providing health care is because you shouldn't even hold up those 5 seconds in which you should be saving someone's life. You should not give any reason to waste time. In fact, the rabbis say that the prohibition against Inui Hadin is that a rabbi is required to respond to people in need as soon as possible and not to hold up the judgment in a rabbinic case. So they say that actually applies to doctors as well. If people are waiting for you in need, you have to be there for them as quickly as possible. So the truth is, this is quite a high standard, quite a high expectation that we are placing on healthcare professionals. And the truth is, it exists in bioethics. In secular bioethics, there is also expectations, articulation of significant demands upon healthcare providers. Some argue that it's a basic common morality, that people should be there for others, care for others, and especially as one develops the training and the skills to provide more sophisticated healthcare, because you have that ability, you have an expectation, a common morality to provide that to people in need. There's also sort of an implied consent, an express consent that they say, which is that basically by accepting a job as a healthcare provider, you're basically implicitly consenting to the expectations and the demands associated with that field. And, it's implied in the codes and professional standards that I mentioned at the outset. And even more significantly, perhaps, many suggest that in healthcare, there's this idea of reciprocity. Sometimes it's referred to as like a social contract, which is that to become a healthcare provider, one receives many advantages in society. Aid, whether it's support, government funding for or subsidies for their medical education or their residencies, or whether it's licensure and standards that grant them monopolies in many healthcare professions that enables them to make a more significant salary. Whatever it is, social prestige, healthcare providers receive privileges from society, and therefore the argument goes, they can also be expected to risk themselves when asked to. Furthermore, going one step further, before we start to ask, is this really the extent of expectations, because this is quite a high bar. There is in bioethics a principle of beneficence, and this principle of beneficence is in Judaism as well. In fact, the bioethicists trace it back to the Torah. Ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. You must love your neighbor as yourself. This is the klal gadol of the Torah, loving your neighbor as yourself, and it requires us to care for people in need. In the bioethics literature, there is a major debate about specific beneficence or general beneficence. Do I have to provide beneficence, care, do good for every person in the world? Or is it specifically people I'm in a relationship with, my patient, my neighbor, my family member? And do I have to provide beneficence to just their healthcare needs as a healthcare professional or their entire overall well-being? But in Judaism, it's very clear that it's all people for all their well-being. We have ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. You have to show this towards everyone. This is what the Rambam writes clearly. It means it's for your entire community. And that is a very, very high standard. Now, do you have to risk yourself for it? I mean, it's one thing to be expected to provide these healthcare for people in need. But how about if I have to risk myself? I mean, can I be forced to risk myself for someone else? And this is a question that's debated in Jewish literature for millennia, since the Gemara. The Gemara itself, the Talmud Bavli, has the famous story of Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura that were walking in the desert, and they only had one kiton achashomayim. They only had one pitcher of water. And Rabbi Akiva's holding it. It's his pitcher of water. But they know that there's only enough water in there for one of them to survive if they drink it to get back to civilization. And the question is, what should they do? Ben Petura says, share it. Yes, they'll both die, but how can you let someone else die? Rabbi Akiva says, no, chayecha kodmin lechayecha vercha. The chayechicha imach is the verse is based on your life comes first. You don't have to risk your life for someone else. Obviously, if you can help someone, you should help them. Lo tamad adam reyecha. You should save someone else's life, but not if it risks your own life. That's what the Gemara says. In the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, there's another story. It seems to be a machlokas. The Talmud Yerushalmi tells a story of Reb Ami. Reb Ami was a rabbi who was captured by enemies. And basically the rabbis are discussing, and they say, there's nothing we can do. I mean, he's captured, he's a prisoner now, and he's going to die. What can we do about it? Until Reish Lakish, one of the rabbis, says, no, ana aktil, I'm going to go and kill or be killed. And the rabbis are like, no, just prepare his burial shrouds. He's like, no, watch this. He goes in there, and he saves his life, brings back Rav Ami. And some of the rabbis said, oh, wow, you see from that, and Reish Lakish was unique. He had this ability, but maybe there is a requirement to risk your life for someone else. So it becomes a big debate amongst the rabbis, and basically the rabbis say, we paskin like the Bavli, like always. We rule like the Babylonian Talmud, like Rabbi Akiva, your life comes first. However, the rabbis say, you don't need to be so cautious that your life comes first. I mean, sometimes you don't have to risk your life, but you can risk somewhat to save someone else. You can do something helpful for someone, and even if it's a little bit risky, and maybe even in high risk in certain situations. It became irrelevant in the Tshuva and the Radvaz. The truth is, we discuss this in relation to organ donation very frequently. The Radvaz, 15th century Egypt, he was asked by someone who was told, he was captured by the authorities there in Egypt, and they said to him, we're going to either just have fun with the Jews, we're going to either cut off your arm, and let us cut off your arm, or we're going to kill someone else from your community. So his dilemma was, do I cut off my arm? But if they cut off my arm, it saves a life. If I say no, they're going to kill someone else. So what's more important, my arm or their life? So they asked the Radvaz, and remember, this is also at a time when cutting off someone's arm was potentially life-threatening. So the Radvaz says, it depends. If you will likely die as a result, you are forbidden from doing it. You may not, and if you do it, it's what he calls a chassid shota, chassidus shel shtus. It's a pious fool. You're not allowed to give your life for someone else. What if the danger is not so high, though? So if the danger is not so high, he says, well, then you could. You're allowed to. You're not required, but you're allowed. What if the danger is very low? The danger is low, but if you engage in this risk, you could save a life. So if it's low danger, but high potential, then you should risk. So we have these different levels. Very high risk to your life, you should not do it. Minimal risk, you should do it. Moderate risk, you can do it. And that's the general approach in Judaism to risk for someone else. But healthcare professionals are slightly different. There is more of an expectation in halacha, partially because normal societal function requires having healthcare professionals, and people are allowed to engage in risk that society needs, and that is part of their professional endeavor. Halacha has always allowed that, whether it's various types of people that have to climb into trees for their job. Halacha allows the person to engage in risk for their livelihood. So doctors, and nurses, there's a higher expectation for them to risk themselves for the sake of their job. Now, in the bioethics literature, you find some concern about, what if people, specifically medical professionals, risk themselves too much? Then you're going to have none left. Because what if they all die? What if they all get sick? Then you have no one left. You often find the rabbis, like I saw this in a tshuva of the Sanzer Rebbe in particular, that he wrote to his hospital, Laniado Medical Center in Netanya, where he says, no, the opposite. They should risk themselves because they should prevent a plague, an outbreak from getting too big. So they should be on the front lines before it spreads too much. Different perspective, maybe a different type of communal attitude, but nevertheless, a very high demand. So I want to turn my attention now to really the focus of my remarks this afternoon, or whenever you're listening. And that is, there must be some limits. I mean, some of the demands that I have articulated, basically I've only said so far that one is not expected to risk their life if it's certain, or near certain, or high risk. But is that it? I mean, does someone have to always constantly give of themselves for others? Is there an expectation that one always be available? Based on what I've said, it sort of implies, if I said a doctor can't make a bracha because those 5 seconds of holding up a patient is inappropriate, can they ever take a break? Are nurses allowed to take breaks? Are doctors allowed to take breaks? Based on what we said, it implies that a break is never allowed. Could they even go to sleep at night? What if you're going to get a call? I mean, I know this is a ridiculous extreme, but how far do we take this? There have to be limits. So one way of articulating limits, I think a kind of general way of articulating limits, would simply be pointing out the fact that the Gemara, the Talmud, has mentioned from the beginning of the medical profession that Judaism is careful to ensure that we do not want to create disincentives to go into healthcare. We don't want to scare people away from wanting to become a doctor. So, for example, in civil law, choshen mishpat laws, what if a doctor is rushing to the hospital and because someone's dying and they're rushing to save their life, and en route they were to cause some kind of damage to property? Are they held responsible? I'm rushing to the hospital, I crash into a car, I come back, I leave a note after, but do I have to pay for that? I'm rushing to the hospital. So, interestingly, the Gemara says they should not be held liable because they'll be too reluctant to go otherwise. We even have a principle called hitiru sofo mishum tchilaso. So, hitiru tchilaso mishum sofo, which is really what I'm focusing on now. Hitiru tchilaso mishum sofo is, it's both ways, that what if I need to go to the hospital, but what if I don't live nearby and it's Shabbos? Let's say I just sat down for Kiddush Friday night with my family, and as I sit down I get a call, urgent patient needs me at the hospital, and I only can get there by driving. I'm a doctor, so let's say that doctor is needed. He has to drive, or she has to drive on Shabbos to get there. But then they realize, so I'm going to get there, having missed dinner with my family, and now I'm going to have to sit in my office for the whole Shabbos? Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be stuck there. I can't, because I live 10 miles away. So the rabbi said, well, because we're afraid you won't want to go if you know you can't come back, therefore they allowed you to come back. Now, how they do that, that's complicated. You can't necessarily violate a Torah prohibition, but you can violate a rabbinic prohibition, so maybe you would take a cab and not drive back. But the point is that the rabbis were concerned not to create disincentives. This is why Rav Moshe Feinstein actually writes, can a doctor charge for their services? Can a doctor charge? Do you have to pay? Can a doctor receive salary? A good salary? Can they receive a real salary? It might sound like a foolish question, but you're not supposed to receive salary for doing mitzvos. Technically, a rabbi is not supposed to be paid. And a doctor, because they're doing a mitzvah. In fact, some authors write that providing healthcare is the one profession outside of being in a rabbinic profession that your whole job is a mitzvah. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, yeah, it has to be that they can accept a wage, and we have halachic explanations why doctors can be paid, but because no one would go into the profession. So we don't want to create disincentive. So we have that avenue of saying, okay, we have to be reasonable, because otherwise no one could maintain that lifestyle. Furthermore, there's a fascinating halacha in Choshen Mishpat, which the Shulchan Aruch rules that a person may not take on an additional job. And I know I'm saying this as I'm at one job, recording a lecture for another job, but let's put that aside, and hopefully no one else noticed that. Why did I even say that? There is the discussion in Shulchan Aruch goes as follows. You can have multiple jobs, but you cannot, your employer can prevent you from taking another job if that job will impact your current job. The example that Shulchan Aruch gives is, can I have a night job? If that night job will cause me to not get enough sleep, and then I'll show up at work in the morning exhausted. So I can say to my employer, look, I work from 9 to 5. You only own me from 9 to 5. So I work that other job. That job is from 6 to 4 a.m. But you don't own me from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. But the employer is allowed, according to Shulchan Aruch, to say, yeah, but based on what you're doing, you're exhausting yourself. You're burning out. You're making mistakes. And I can tell you, if you want to keep this job, you need to come to work ready to work and prepared, and therefore I can tell you not to take that job if it's exhausting you. And in fact, the rabbis do hold doctors responsible, not for damages on their way, but accidental damages that they cause to patients, they are. So we know that people who are overworked, who are exhausted, will not only burn out, but they will make more mistakes. And when in healthcare, the concern is so great that the stakes are so high that a person has to be careful to make sure they're caring for themselves, because otherwise they'll make mistakes and people will suffer and potentially even die as a result, which would be a horrible outcome. In the bioethics literature, there is a very similar, it's articulated differently, but there's a similar concern. The concern is basically that a person has a responsibility to maintain their own well-being, to prevent burnout. You even have a literature about how today, residents are not allowed to work the same grueling hours that they did in the past. They still do work grueling hours, very long hours, but not the same extent that it used to be. And there is an argument that you find in the bioethics literature, which goes basically, there's been a shift in the focus of medical education. It shifted from inculcating a strong work ethic, professionalism, stamina, self-sacrifice, and it's shifted now to developing a sense of compassion, empathy, self-care, recognizing that there's negative aspects of being overworked. It can drain a person's compassion, their motivation, leads to burnout, errors, and also just speaking, openly and realistically, there is so much suffering in the world. If a person thought, my job is to cure and resolve all human suffering, it's overwhelming. The amount of suffering and pain that exists in one community, in one day, is more than any one person can handle. And so a person has to be able to function over the course of an entire career. They have to be able to recognize, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Now to switch back to rabbinic phrases. You can't finish all of it. You're not ben chorin levatel mimena. You're not free to desist from trying, but you don't have to do it all on your own. So that is one approach. But what I want to share with you in the last few minutes is two approaches that are specifically Jewish, that arise out of specific psukim, verses in the Torah, that give totally unique and different ways of articulating and framing this entire discussion. So till now, let's just summarize, because then I want to conclude with two important points that I think are crucial and unique to Judaism. So we have said so far that there are very high expectations on healthcare professionals, and we demand a lot from them, and we need a lot from them, and their jobs are very important, and therefore we need them even to risk themselves, risk their health and well-being, and sometimes even the health and well-being of their families and friends and loved ones on behalf of their patients. And right now, in the midst of this COVID crisis, they're doing that. They're doing that, and bless them for that. And we need to thank them every day, the healthcare providers, for what they're doing for our community. But then we ask, are there any limits though? I mean, do these expectations apply, is there infinitely? I mean, can we ever say that a healthcare provider deserves a break? Can they ever say no? Can they ever say, I can't go that far, I can't do that much, I'm not able to risk myself that much? Is there any limit? And we said there has to be some limits. I mean, logically, a person has to care for themselves, a person has to be able to function, a person has to be able to prevent burnout, a person has to be able to function over the course of their career, right? We often say it's a marathon, not a sprint. If you get risk yourself too much and you're too, even if I use the word dedicated, a person will burn out. It's impossible to last like that. Now I want to share, though, a unique perspective. There is a verse in the Torah, V'hashevos alo, you shall return the lost object. And the rabbis, interestingly, understood that as not just meaning that I must return an item if I find it. Someone loses something, yes, I have to return their lost object. But I also have to return someone, not just their objects, but their health. The rabos gufo is the word that they use. I have to return their body. Also, in a different discussion, we have to return someone's soul. That's the job also of rabbis and people in the community, help people find themselves emotionally, spiritually. That's also what chaplains are involved with, helping people, and they're also risking themselves right now during the COVID crisis. And I want to give a shout out to chaplains, even though that sounds self-aggrandizing, so I'll limit it. But the verse of returning lost objects is to return a person's health. However, interestingly, when it comes to returning lost objects, there are limits. We are not required to return everything at all times. Okay, if I see someone, someone's in here and they leave their iPhone here. So yeah, I would think, an iPhone's pretty easily to identify. I can find the person. It's something that they're going to be upset that they lost. I should go out of my way, help them find their iPhone, right? I need to return that lost object. What if though I'm walking down the street and I don't know who's there, it's a public area, and there's a nickel on the floor? Just a nickel, in the middle of some street. I don't know who's been here. There's hundreds of people. Do I have to now start going crazy? I better find who owned this nickel. Maybe I could post it on Facebook and I'll put up signs. Did you lose a nickel? Describe the nickel. Obviously not. It's ridiculous. I don't have to return everything. Not only that, but there's exceptions to how far I have to go and how much I have to sacrifice myself. Do I have to pay money? If I find something, do I have to pay for ads? Do I have to really spend my money to help someone find their object, or can I just kind of put it out there for them to find it? There are many exemptions. I'll read to you what Rav Zilberstein quotes here, his great father-in-law, Rav Eliashiv, Zichrono Livracha. Rav Eliashiv writes, he says, when it comes to healthcare, there is lo tomod adam riach. If someone is dying, I have to drop everything, save their life. But let's say someone is not dying. They're sick. They need healthcare, but they're managing for the moment, right? And there is a healthcare system that hopefully can care for them. Do I have to drop everything every time? So Rav Eliashiv writes, he says, in his words, mitzvahs hashavos aveda, the mitzvah hashavos aveda, lo mechayeves lahagish es hatipul hatov bayoser. It requires returning someone's health, but not to go to the extremes to give them the best possible healthcare. We have to try to help, but we don't have to do everything based on the requirements of hashavos aveda. Ima rofa alo linazek mikach. In particular, if it's going to be damaging to the doctor, you do not have to damage yourself to return someone's lost object. So this is one avenue that some take. This is what Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein takes. He says, look, a doctor has to go only as far as they have to go to return lost objects. And that's limited and within reason. There are problems with that, though. For example, it's not a direct parallel. So in the laws of returning lost objects, there is a caveat, zakein ve'enu lefi kvodo. One of the rules is that if I'm a zaken, if I'm an elder, if I'm an honored person, if I'm a dignified person, I don't necessarily, it might be that me, Jason, I'm just a regular guy. So I see some object here. I see someone left, their planner or something, not necessarily the most valuable thing, but something, maybe I'm going to go spend a half an hour trying to find the person. But if the CEO walks in here, am I going to say, hey, CEO, I know you're in the middle of a global pandemic, you're running this hospital, but stop everything, see who's lost, who dropped their notebook here. Like certain times, the halacha is, you don't have to go to every extent, especially if it's beneath someone's dignity, so to speak, if they have other things to do. I'm saying it in kind of a general way. That's what we say when it comes to returning lost objects. But when it comes to visiting the sick and supporting the sick, we say, afilu gadol esol katan. Even the most dignified person is expected to provide support for the person that's least dignified. And obviously, we don't want to be classifying people and trying to determine who's dignified, who's not dignified, who's honored, who doesn't deserve honor. But the point is, there's no limit to the amount of dignity that someone should be trying to determine, oh, I'm too dignified to visit or support that patient. The halacha is clear. Everyone is expected to help every patient. It doesn't matter what they're suffering from or how low in their society they would be considered. You have to care for them. So that is a difference between returning lost objects and providing health care. And there's others. So I don't know that the parallel is perfect. And so what I want to do in these last few minutes now, my goal of this presentation, meaning the source that I want to share, that I just found so inspiring and moving and unique. And it really, I think about now that I kind of learned this issue and worked through it on my own, it's something that I now kind of apply on a daily basis to decision making. And this comes from the laws of Pesach. So now I'm just going to pull out the books, the Svarim that I found this in. And specifically, and I'm holding here, Shabbos Teshuvos Minchas Asher, Rav Asher Weiss, Chelik Gimel, and we are in Tshuva Mem Beis 42. So he's asked, and the truth is, this is a common question. I'm also going to be quoting now from Chazon Ovadia on Pesach, Shabbos Teshuvos, Chelik Beis. This is Rav Ovadia Yosef. One of the common questions that comes up with Pesach, it's a standard in all the halacha works about Passover, is how much pain do I have to endure to fulfill the mitzvot of Pesach? Specifically because sometimes there are mitzvot with Pesach that people find uncomfortable. For example, drinking 4 cups of wine. Not everyone likes drinking wine. Not everyone enjoys it. How much you have to drink? Or the maror. Maror is sour, spicy. What's the phrase? Bitter. Thank you. It's bitter herbs, and it doesn't. It's not the best tasting thing. I happen to like maror actually, and I eat it well past Passover. But not everyone likes it. And how much do you have to extend yourself to eat something that you don't enjoy? So this is a question that the poskim deal with. When it comes to sukkah, by the way, it's also an issue because we have a rule in Jewish law: hamitzta'er patur min sukkah. If you don't like being in the sukkah, you don't have to stay in there. But that's unique to sukkah because we say teishu k'ein taduro. You have to stay in the sukkah the way you stay in your house. And if you would leave your house, you leave the sukkah. So that's unique. But when it comes to Pesach, how far would we go? Actually, Rav Asher Weiss quotes in his Tshuva here that Rav Yehuda Bar Eli, in the Gemara it says that he said, you know what? I don't like drinking wine. I don't enjoy wine, but it's the mitzvah of Pesach, so I'll drink it. He forced himself, even though he didn't like it. He drank all Daled Tostos, all 4 cups. And then it says he had a headache all the way until Shavuos, 50 days. For months, he had a headache because of it. He hated it. But he said, you know what? It's the mitzvah. I'm going to do it. And I'm happy to do it. And even though I'm going to be in pain, you got to do it. So the question is, do I really have to go that far? Is that the halacha? So Rav Asher Weiss goes into depth. And he writes, if you look carefully, the Mishnah Berurah says that basically you should push yourself. You are supposed to push yourself, but not if it makes you sick. If it would actually make you feel sick, you don't. And the reason that is that normally the Mishnah Berurah implies that you should undergo a little bit of tircha to do a mitzvah. It should have some kind of mitzvah. You should be able to be uncomfortable to do a mitzvah. It's the mitzvah. And even if you have to push yourself, we don't walk around in Judaism to say, you know what, I don't feel like putting on tefillin, I don't feel like shaking a lulav, I'm not in the mood. No, even if it's not comfortable, we do it. And usually after we do it, we're glad we did it. But even if not, we do it. So the Mishnah Berurah implies there that the halacha is you must drink the wine, even if it bothers you. Except that there's one caveat, which is that if it's going to make you sick, you don't do it, but only because it's not derech cherus. You on Pesach, we're supposed to be like a king, like a queen, living like free people, and like royalty. And royalty would not eat something if it bothered them. So the halacha is, don't make yourself sick. for the wine, but if it's a little bit annoying, drink it, push yourself. Okay, many people drink grape juice or whatever it is, and that's fine. But the halacha ideally is to drink the wine. So then the Mishnah Berurah goes on in another halacha in the laws of Pesach about maror, and it says, what if I don't like the maror? And it bothers me. Do I have to eat it even if I get sick? Because, I have to go even further? And the halacha is, no. Just have a little bit, just eat a little bit, and don't go that much further. So the question is this a contradiction? Because Rav Asher Weiss's argument, the halacha seems to imply you have to even get sick, just not with the wine, because wine we have to drink in the way that kings and queens drink. But with the maror, it didn't make us go that far. So he gives an answer. His answer is, V'nir ikar b'zeh, he says, the answer must be, Shnei dinim yesh b'zeh. There's two halachas. What is it? V'afte ein adam chayav lipul lemishkav kadei lekayim mitzvah. Even though we do not have to make ourselves sick to do a mitzvah, mikol makom rishayu lasos kain. If you want to, if you feel like I need to do the mitzvah, you can do it. Kadei lekayim mitzvah. In order to do it, you can do it. Rishayu lasos kain. V'efshar da'af nis chasidish yesh b'zeh. It might even be pious to fulfill the mitzvah. However, b'dalit kosos ein zeh derech cherus v'lo yatsi dei chavasim. When it comes to dalit kosos, it's not cherus, and you should not push yourself if you're going to get sick. So he's saying, with mitzvos, there is this idea that you should push yourself, and it's pious to do so. You don't have to push yourself so far, and especially when it comes to the cups of wine, you don't have to make yourself sick over it, but you should make yourself a little bit uncomfortable. He then concludes that basically he gives these three levels, where he basically says, if someone would become dangerously ill by doing a mitzvah, let's remember healthcare in mind, you would not have to do it. In fact, it might even be forbidden to do a mitzvah that would make you dangerously ill, risking your life for the mitzvah. If the mitzvah would make you moderately ill, it would make you sick, nafal mishkav, bedridden, you can do it. It would be pious, but you don't have to. But if you would be just mitzta'er, just a little uncomfortable, it's annoying, I don't love it, it's not my favorite thing, I don't enjoy maror, I'd rather be eating sushi. Why do I have to eat maror? I say, you know what, the halacha is eat maror, okay, you don't like it, try your best, this is the mitzvah on Pesach, even if it's a little bit annoying, a little bothering you have to do the mitzvah still. Those are the three levels he gives. Now, here's where I want to take it a step deeper. This still leaves a lot of room for kind of trying to figure out, what do I mean exactly? So he quotes there, and in fact, I'm going to read it to you. I'll quote it from him first, and then I'll read it to you from Rav Ovadia Yosef. He then says, maybe there's one halachic category that I can use to help me determine how far I have to go to get sick, to risk myself, to do a mitzvah, to do something good. And he says, here it is. We have a halacha from a kal v'chomer miyotzos mama. We can learn from when it comes to the laws of tzedakah. Before we suggested learning a limit from the laws of returning lost objects, from Shabbos Hagadol. That was one category, but I tried to point out that is very limited. But there's another halacha. There is a halacha when it comes to charity, tzedakah, giving to people in need. We are expected to give a tenth, meiser, a tenth of our income, a tenth of our wealth, we're supposed to give to people in need. But is there a limit? Do I have to give unlimited amounts? Should I be required to give all my money? I mean, there's so much suffering, so much pain. Maybe I should give everything. So he quotes a halacha then, in this regard, which says, Zim ein adam levazvez hon rav al mitzvos. There's a prohibition, hamavazvez al yavazvez yoter michomesh. The halacha is, I'm expected to give a tenth of my income, but I'm not allowed to give more than a 20th. If I give, a fifth, much less. I'm not allowed to give more than a fifth of if I give more than a fifth of my income, the concern is that's too much. I'm going to then become impoverished myself, and I won't be able to perform mitzvot. If the whole idea is to continue a life, a society of doing good, so as much as I want to help others, and I have to help others, there also is a limit. The limit is a fifth of my income. So what he argues here is, if we're going to say that I can't give a fifth of my income, remember, we have to give a tenth, so we have to be helping, we have to be doing something. But if there's a limit to how much I can give, should that apply not just to money, but also to my being, my energy? Do I have to give of myself beyond a fifth of myself? Meaning I have to give of myself. That we've already established. We are expected to help others. All people, at all times. But how far? So he argues, if this rule applies to money, I lost my place. Yeah, if this rule applies to money, he says, you don't have to get sick over it. I should not have my body more important to me than my money, or my money more important than my body. That is explicit. And the Hari Amru, the rabbi said in the Gemara, we have to be more concerned with wasting our body than we are with wasting our money. And if people are going to be careful about their money, they should be careful with their body. Let me read this to you in the way that Rav Ovadia Yosef writes this. And in fact, he's actually quoting Rav Moshe Feinstein. As I said, this is one of the primary halachic issues when it comes to Passover. We have a lot of commandments, a lot of mitzvot that we're expected to do, and some of them people don't like. Some of them are hard. Drinking the 4 cups, eating the maror. So in this course of this discussion, some of the rabbis write, it doesn't matter if you don't like it, you have to do everything. So for example, Rav Ovadia Yosef quotes here, he says, even if it makes you sick to do the mitzvah, as long as it won't endanger your life, you must do the good thing, you must help others, you must do the mitzvah, even if it makes you sick. As long as it's not risking your life. Even if you are healthy now, and your doctors say to you, if you eat matzah, you will get sick. Even then, these rabbis say, Ein poter oso mi mitzvahs achilas matzah omoro. You still have to eat it. Kol she'ein sham chashash sakana. As long as it does not risk your life. You have to get sick to do it. That's what they argue. But then Rav Ovadia Yosef quotes Rav Moshe Feinstein. So I'm reading it from here because the truth he quotes, it's in Igros Moshe, Chelik Orachaim, Siman Kuf Ayin Beis. But I looked it up in there, and it's the same thing, but Rav Ovadia Yosef adds a few words that kind of explain it. So I liked the way Rav Ovadia said it better than the way Rav Moshe said it, even though it's Rav Moshe we're quoting, but I just think it's clear. So Rav Ovadia is responding to that. Do I really have to get sick? I have to get sick to help someone else? I have to go that far? So he says, no. Rav Moshe says, Shekasav, Shemikivan she'al ones mamon yosim michomesh nechshav. Since we say, when it comes to money, I don't have to give more than a fifth, leave the mitzvah saseh, in order to not to do a mitzvah saseh, v'ulai gam b'pachos michomesh, even some say less than a fifth. In kain bevadai de'adif la'adam lizrape michole af b'chol mamono. Since we know that a person would spend all their money to become healed, hilkach havle ones legavi mitzvah saseh patur. Therefore, they're not expected to get sick in order to do the mitzvah either. So the principle that we are developing here is that even though, and of course, we've developed this, and I'm trying to argue how much we are expected and obligated to do everything we can to help those in need. But there has to be a limit. We cannot function without some limit on the expectations of our benevolence and our beneficence and our mitzvot that we do. And so this principle is trying to extrapolate from the laws of tzedakah, which say you cannot give more than a fifth of your possessions to help those in need, to say it applies to your well-being as well. You cannot give more than a fifth of yourself. You have to give a tenth. You have to give something. You have to be helping. But there's also a limit that we can't go too far. Those expectations are limited. Rav Asher Weiss elaborates, because there is another question. So in his sefer on Bereshis, this is Siman Nun Ches, in the new edition, he asks an important question, because the concept of hamavazves ayavazves yosher michomesh. Now this is getting a little bit nitty gritty, but this is important. The concept that I don't have to spend more than a fifth of my wealth to do a mitzvah, that's for a mitzvah aseh, meaning I don't have to do something good if it's going to cost me that much. But it does not apply to a lo taseh. So meaning we cannot. Even if someone says to me, I'm gonna, force you to, it's gonna be so, you're prohibited from, violating Shabbos or eating pork, whatever it is. So when it comes to a negative commandment, you still cannot violate that, even if it's going to be a loss of money. So it's only that you don't have to do an action if you're going to lose, but you still cannot violate prohibitions. So the question becomes, well, providing healthcare. Part of the mitzvah, as we saw, one aspect of the mitzvah is returning lost objects. Okay, I could be exempt, potter, from Hashavas Aveda when it comes to if it's going to cost me more than a fifth of my well-being. But healthcare is also lo ta'amad al dam re'echa. The Torah says, do not stand idly by. So how can I violate not standing idly by because it's going to cost me? So Rav Usher writes as follows. He explains it. He says, "Vel lo taseh," even though on a negative prohibition, "Sarich levazvez kol hono kadei shelo yavor aleha." You have to spend all of your income, all of your wealth, not to violate the Torah prohibition. And he then quotes the Pri Megadim, the Chasam Sofer, who say, no, that's not always true. Rak bekum va'aseh sarich lahotzi kadei shelo yavor. Only when it comes to getting up and doing an action, that I have to spend any amount of money to not violate. But not something that I violate only passively. If I violate it by simply not doing an action, meaning I can't do anything that's prohibited by the Torah, even if I'm going to lose money, I cannot do that action. I cannot, kill someone. I cannot eat that forbidden food. I cannot violate Shabbos. But if the violation is simply by being passive, remaining passive and not doing something, then I can apply this principle of not spending more than a fifth. That's the question. Therefore, according to this, the law of health, providing health care, of lo ta'amad al dam re'echa is the same, and we can apply the concept of hamavazvez al yavazvez yoser michomash. When you spend, don't spend more than a fifth of your well-being. If a person says, if I do this, if I'm expected to do something, I cannot live with myself, I cannot personally do it. It's an emotional, experiential concern. That applies equally to someone simply saying, look, here's my bank account. I just simply can't afford this. If I spend this money, I won't be able to meet my mortgage. I won't be able to pay tuition, whatever. That applies to our personal well-being just as much as it applies to our finances. And, when a person can't say, I'll just spend all my money, I'll just spend everything on this one mitzvah. I have a person suffering, we are allowed to rely on, communal expectations. We can say, I do my part, and hopefully if everyone does their part, we can come together to make a difference. But it's not that I'm expected to do all of it on my own. The same quote as before, Lo alecham lecha ligmor. You're not expected to do it all yourself, but you're not also allowed to exempt yourself. That's how society hopefully should work. So my argument, and I'm just going to sum up now. My argument, and I'll summarize and conclude and try to explain why I think this is so crucial in my last minute here. So we said that basically Judaism and our society in general has very high expectations on healthcare professionals, and for good reason. They're doing very important work, and we need them. And we expect a lot from them, a tremendous amount. So much so that some of the statements that I read earlier even seem to imply that a healthcare professional can't even take a break because they're expected to give everything they have to this important, crucial mitzvah of saving life. Then we discussed the concern that there has to be limits because a person cannot live that way. You cannot live that way that you're constantly risking yourself and giving yourself. And there has to be a limit to how much you can risk yourself. Does the person have to die to save one person? Then how long can they survive as a healthcare provider? So then we suggested a limitation based on the laws of returning lost objects. Just as returning a lost object is the source in the Torah for returning someone's health, and just as I don't have to return every single lost object I find, so too I don't have to go to every extent to return it, and therefore I don't have to go to every extent to provide health care. That might be an approach. Some might like to take that approach. Some do take that approach. I think that approach is somewhat limited. It's imperfect, even as it is interesting and helpful, and therefore I want to advocate for and suggest this approach to all areas of our life. That the laws of tzedakah, of how we spend money, require us to help. They require us to give of our own being, of our own essence, of our own finances, to help others. But they limit. They say at a certain point, yes, sometimes there can be situations when a person can go above and beyond and even spend more. But that's limited. And they generally say, don't even go above and beyond. We have limits on that. And the rabbis, I think in their infinite wisdom, have said, that can apply to a person's well-being. Some expectations on a human being are asking them to give more than a fifth of their essence, of their being, of their finances, of their body, of their emotions, of their mental health. To do something, we cannot ask someone to give that much. So we ask a lot, but there's a limit to how much we can ask for. And so we learn this from the laws of Passover. We say, eat the matzah, eat the maror, even if you don't like it. Drink the daled kosos, the 4 cups, even if you don't like it. Push yourself, but only so far. There's a certain limit. At a certain point, you can say, you know what, I can't do this. This is too much for me. If it's going to make someone seriously ill, emotionally, mentally, physically, there are limits built into the system. And so in all of our lives, in all areas, whether it's healthcare providers saying at a certain point, I can't do this anymore, I need a break, I need help, I need assistance, I need more training, I need someone else who has the training to do this, I need to care for myself, I need to draw boundaries. And whether it's any person in any area of their life, when they simply say, I've met my limit, I have limits. It's okay to have limits. We have to have limits. We learn from the laws of Passover, and hopefully this can benefit us throughout our lives, that it is valid, it's okay at some point to say, I can't do anymore. Adikan v'lo yoter. I don't have any more in me. You're allowed to sometimes take a break, to stop, to recuperate, to recognize your limits. May we all recognize our limits so that we will be able to live up to our expectations and still be able to provide care and compassion and support to all those in need, and be able to do so for many, many years of good health, as we thank all the healthcare providers who are risking themselves right now, as we pray for all the patients who are suffering and who are sick. May we all know good health and strength and a productive society that we can come back together, hopefully very soon, and rejoice again in happiness, in love, in good health, and with proper limits and boundaries on our well-being. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Kasher v'Sameach. I hope everyone has a meaningful Passover.